Hi everyone, my name is Elsa and today I'm going to do the second part of video I posted a few days ago, and this is the books I liked least during the 4 months I was absent, so in August, September, October and November. So I did the first part of this video with all the books I liked the most, and now I'm going to do the books I liked the least. So I'm going to start with the books I liked the most in the category of books I like the least. I don't know if it's clear. Let's just say I'm going to start with the books I rated 3 stars and going down to the books I rated 1 star, because there's one. So let's just dive into it. First we have Mashle. So this is a manga series. I read the 3 first volumes, and this is a shonen and it's really funny. So basically it's a Harry Potter parody. The story is taking place in this fantasy world where everyone basically has powers, and the few that don't are ostracized and left on the side. And our main character doesn't have powers at all, and because of that he's in danger, and so he has to go to this magical school and pretend he has powers. And it's really funny. Like, it's hilarious, and I actually rated the first volume 4 stars, but my problem with the series is that it went a bit downhill. Like, the idea is amazing and I loved our main character and I loved how funny it is and how it played on, you know, the Harry Potter parody thing. The problem is it was mostly done in the first book, and then in the second and third book the author went in a direction of more classic shonen, with like one character trying to do their best to, you know, reach their objective, and with a lot of action scenes and fights, etc., and less humor and parody. And so it became a bit unoriginal, and, you know, things I have seen done before a million times and not done as good as in other mangas. So far it's not an amazing series. Like, it started great and then went a bit tropey. Then we have The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So this one and DNF'd. I wasn't really in the best mood when I picked this up. Like, I was in a reading slump and maybe I shouldn't have picked this up at the time. I might come back to it, but so far it's like the humor wasn't really my thing, and maybe, like I said, it was because I wasn't in the right mood, or maybe it's just not my humor. So I will try again and we'll see how it goes. Then we have another DNF, Jade War. So this is the second book in the Jade City saga, and I completely understand everyone who loves this series. Like, objectively it's an amazing series. It's just not exactly for me. Like, this is, if you don't know about this city, who is inspired by Shanghai in 1920, 1930, something like that, correct me if I'm wrong. And there are 2 main gangs ruling over the city, and they have Jade, and Jade gives them magical powers, and that's why they are ruling the city. So you have this mafia vibe and also this historical fiction vibe with fantasy in the mix, and the writing is amazing and the mafia vibe is incredible and the politics behind it are really well done. The characters are extremely complex. It's just that it doesn't work for me. Like, I think the mafia vibe isn't really my thing, and the politics behind it are a bit too much. Like, I love politics more in a court setting. Like the politics are inside the clan, and that I'm not crazy about. I also don't really care about the characters. Like, they're really well done characters, like really complex characters, but I don't really care about them. And I'm a character driven reader, so if I don't connect with the characters, I won't enjoy the book as much. And that's what happened here. It's also extremely slow paced, and I have a hard time with slow paced books. I can take them only if I have amazing characters, and in this case, like, as I don't connect to them, it's too slow paced for me. Then we have Mask of Mirrors. Same, I DNF'd it, but same as for Jade War, I think it's a great series, it's just not for me. The story is taking place in this fantasy world, and you have this girl who came from a very poor family, and so she had a really hard life, and she manages to impersonate someone from a noble family, and so pretending to be this girl she's not, she infiltrates a very powerful family, and she tries, you know, to win power and money through this act. The representation was great, the idea was great, the characters are extremely complex, the world building is next level, incredibly well done. My problems with it were, first, it's really slow paced, like really slow paced, and there are a lot of world building, and I think a bit too much world building. Like in this case, there are so many details and so many things to remember. Like you even have tarot games, and you have to know the meaning behind all of the cards, etc., behind all the customs and all the names and all the families, and there are like a million characters, and you have to know everybody and everybody's history and the geography of every little square of the place. It's really, really complicated. Like you need a 60 pages guide to understand this book. And it was just too much world building and too slow paced. And I really felt like I was fed all these informations that I couldn't absorb anymore, and that the story was like not going anywhere, and the characters were interesting but not enough for me to, you know, go through this book. So I still think it's really, really well done, and you can give it a try and see if it's okay for you, but to me it was really too slow paced and too much world building. Then we have Furiously Happy. So this is a non-fiction about mental health, and same, I DNF'd it, and I think it's because I wasn't in the right mood at the time, and also because maybe the humor doesn't work for me. The author of this book has mental health issues, and so she talks about them in this book. And what was a bit jarring for me is that she talks about her mental health problems with a very light tone and very funny humor. And I get why she did this, but to me the contrast was a bit jarring, and the problem was the humor was a bit too much for me. Like it felt a bit forced, and it didn't really work. Like it didn't make me laugh, and so I don't think it's my humor, and not really the kind of book I wanted. It has a very high rating on Goodreads, and it worked for many people, so maybe give it a try, but yeah, not really for me. Then we have The Invention of Hugo Cabret. So this is a middle grade historical fiction taking place, I think, in the early 20th century, maybe 1930, something like that, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you're following basically this little boy, I think he's around 10, and he lives inside a train station in Paris, working in the train station, you know, fixing the clocks in the train station. And he's obsessed about this figurine, like this automaton, that his father before him was obsessed about. And there's a story behind that, but basically he's trying to fix the automaton, thinking that maybe his father left a message for him and he will be able to access it if he can fix the automaton. And he encounters this girl and her grandfather, and there's a story there. I loved the idea behind this book, and I love the format. I will maybe put some images here, but the thing is, the format is amazing because you have drawings alternating with a narration, and the drawings are just so well done, and they just really complete the narration. Like what's in the images isn't in the narration. Like the narration will stop, you will have the drawings and understands what happened in the stories through the drawings, and then go back to the narration as if you know, the drawings had been narrated. It's really well done. The drawings are gorgeous. Like this, the alternating format and why it was used and how it was used was incredible. Loved it so much. My only problem with it was that I was a bit bored with the story. I didn't really care about the characters, and the plot wasn't really interesting to me. I felt really bored reading it, and it was a bit cheesy and very dramatic and not really that impressive in the end, and I don't know, I was a bit disappointed by it. Then we have Natural History of Dragons. So this is fantasy book and historical fiction at the same time. This book is taking place, I think, around the 19th century, but in an alternate 19th century where basically dragons are real. The book basically is narrated by this older woman who is a very well-known scientific specialized in the study of dragons. And she became very famous because of her studies, but now she's writing her memoirs to explain what she did during her life and how she became who she became. I had really high expectations going into this book, and I was a bit disappointed, to be honest. The book is gorgeous, like the cover and the paper and everything is just so beautiful, and you have illustrations inside it, and the illustrations are actual drawings the main character did. So it has a meaning and it's so well done. So that I loved. I also loved the atmosphere. It feels like it was written in the 19th century. So the historical fiction aspect was extremely well done. But I had a lot of problems with it. First, I didn't really like our main character. You can't really, blame her, but she was raised to be a noble woman, and because of that, she's kind of pretentious, and she kind of looks down on people who don't have her status. Like, she goes on this trip and she meets local people that aren't as rich as her and don't have her education, and she's kind of always looking down on them, and it's a bit annoying, and she has, that kind of attitude towards them that really bothered me. And this is linked to another of my problems with this book, is that even though the historical fiction is extremely well done, it's a bit too well done, in the sense that the way of thinking is of the 19th century, so don't expect any representation. And it's very sexist. Even the main character is sexist because it's, integrated sexism. She grew up in a sexist environment. Obviously, she's going to have sexist thoughts, and technically she's very feminist in the sense that what she's doing isn't allowed to women in her time. But at the same time, you can't help but, suffer from these sexist thoughts here and there, and also this sexist atmosphere. Like, it's really well done, and you can't blame the book for it because it still has a feminist message. I don't know if it's clear, but still it was a bit annoying to read. You also have, the colonization aspect of it. Like, they are basically England, and England colonized some countries, and the way they think about colonized people and colonized countries, like, it's really well done for the time, and at the same time it's really annoying. And same, you can't really blame them for it. Like, it's well done. It was like they thought this way at the time, but same, 21st century, hard to read. So yeah, there were a lot of things like that that really bothered me. Like, I get it, but still really bothering. And the other thing that really bothered me was the plot. Really, really, really boring. Like, I didn't care at all. I wanted adventures, I didn't got any, and it was extremely slow paced and really, down to the details. They are going to sleep here, and they're going to write a letter there, and they're going to search some footprints on the ground at some point. Some things happened, but I was really, really bored. And lastly, there's the dragons. So I'm obsessed with dragons. I love dragons with all my heart. I read anything with a dragon in it. The problem is, in this book, dragons are like wolves. They are just like animals. They aren't smart, and they are predators. Like, the people don't really care about them in the sense that they aren't magical, amazing creatures. They're predators that eat sheep, and so because of that, they ought to be killed, just like wolves. And so they go on hunts and they study them, but not with this, admiration you could find in another book. And so basically, the main character is obsessed with dragons, but in the anatomy aspect of it. And so when she goes, study them, she actually kills them to study them. And it really, really bothered me. Like, I wasn't there to kill dragons. I was there to, admire them. And seeing her killing dragons was like, seriously? So yeah, and just to study them. I think it's an awful reason, to kill a creature just to study it is like, I don't know, really bothered me. And so yeah, this book really, really didn't work for me, but it might for you. If the things I said don't bother you, maybe give it a try. Then we have The Rise of Kyoshi. So this one was so disappointing as well. I thought for sure it would be a 5 stars, and it wasn't awful, but it was a bit of a letdown. If you don't know, this book is inspired by Avatar: The Last Airbender show, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. Please go watch it if you haven't yet. And we are following Kyoshi, who is an avatar 2 avatars before Aang. And basically, the world building was phenomenal, obviously, because it's the world building from Avatar. But the story of Kyoshi in itself wasn't that incredible. I loved the first third of the book. Like, the first third, incredible. I loved what they did with Kyoshi and how they introduced her and what happened just before, well, in the beginning. And the entire iceberg part, I was so there for it. Loved it so much. And then it went kind of downhill for me. Like, I liked Kyoshi, but only liked, and she really, really, really annoyed me at times. Like, and her character arc was a bit confusing. Like, she was one person at one point, and 2 pages later, she was a completely different person, and that really bothered me. And like after that she again transformed into somebody else, and every time she transformed it wasn't like, you know, progressive. It was like one page she was someone and the next page she was someone else, and it really really bothered me. And you also have this relationship with her guard, so you have this sapphic romance. It was so insta-lovey. I was so frustrated about that because it had a great potential, but it was so insta-lovey that I didn't find it romantic at all. You also have this friend group, and they tried to do a found family, but it was really disappointing in the sense that same, it was insta friendship, like they didn't know each other and 2 pages later they were best friends, and I was like, seriously, like work on the relationships, like it doesn't happen like that, you know, you have to work on that. And so yeah, relationships wise it was really 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 disappointing. Characters were just okay, and the side characters really really weren't complex enough or developed enough, and the story itself went a bit all over the place and there were inconsistencies in that. I don't know, I was really really disappointed by it. There were some good ideas and some really great scenes, but overall I wasn't that interested in the book. Alright, next category are the 2.5 stars. So first we have The Best of All Possible Worlds. So this is a standalone, an adult sci-fi, and I really really wanted to love this book and I didn't. So why? There wasn't much of a plot. Like, I can't really even tell you what this is about. You have these people that lived on a planet and they can't live on it anymore, and so they're looking for a new planet. And you have this girl that is helping them, you know, finding a good place to settle and convincing people to go with them so they can, you know, repopulate. Basically that's it. But the problem is you have the timeline is really like you have a lot of time jumps. Like, you're going to start at one point, follow them for maybe 1 week, and then 1 year later, and then 3 months later, and then 6 months later, and it's always the same. Like almost every chapter you have a time jump, so really jarring, really annoying. It's also really confusing. Like, there are a lot of information that's ungiven or given, you know, afterwards, but not explained well enough, so really really confusing. The relationship, like, it had so much potential. Like, there's, because there are all these time jumps, you don't really connect with them and we know feel the relationship growing with time. And the main characters were interesting, but I didn't really connect with them either, because same, you don't spend enough time with them and enough time in their head, and I don't know, it was just not that interesting and a bit all over the place. Then we have Firekeeper's Daughter. So this is an unpopular opinion, so maybe give it a try and you will love it more than me, but I didn't have it at like maybe 30%. I might give it another try, maybe I wasn't in the right mood, but I don't think it's for me. I didn't really like the writing and I didn't really connect with the main character. Like, she was okay, but she wasn't really that complex or that developed, and the friendship she has was a bit superficial to me. Like, the dialogues were really cringy to me, like extremely stereotypical. Even though there were great ideas and representation, I wasn't that into it, and it felt like really over the top in the sense that, you know, you have to suspend your disbelief a lot in this book, and it was a bit too much for me. Like, and you also have, you know, this drug thing, and I really really don't like books that talk about drugs. And so even though it was, you know, to stop the drug sales, etc., I really really don't like that kind of plot. And I don't know, the romance was a bit cringy as well, and I had barely started. I don't know, it really wasn't clicking with me, and maybe it's just me, but I don't know, it didn't work for me. Then we have House of Many Ways. So this is the third book in the House Moving Castle series. I'm going to go back to book 2 in a minute, but the third book, it's a trilogy, but each book is a standalone, just taking place in the same universe, and Howl and Sophie make a little apparition in book 2 and book 3. That's why it's a series, but technically they're all standalones. And seriously, you should stop at the end of Howl's Moving Castle and consider it a standalone, because I hated book 2. I'm going to go back to it, and really didn't like the volume 3. I didn't like the main character. She was extremely annoying. Like, she was really bossy and pretentious and just mean and really unlikable. The plot was all over the place. It made no sense. There were a lot of inconsistencies, and it wasn't that interesting, and I don't know, it was really not that interesting and boring. And Howl and Sophie weren't great in that book, so I would have preferred to never see them, because I would have preferred to, you know, keep in mind how they were like in the first book, because they don't feel like themselves in this one. So yeah, we don't recommend at all. Then we have The Starless Sea, so same, this is an unpopular opinion, many people love this book, and I can totally see why, like it's really a me thing. This book is a fantasy standalone. I don't know if it's YA or adult, it's a bit in the middle. The story is really hard to explain, but you're following this young man, he's like maybe 20, and things happen and he's dragged into this story, and everything is linked to a gigantic library that is in this sort of otherworldly cave, and there are a lot of mysteries surrounding this library and he's really interested in it, and yeah, that's the story basically. And you have alternating chapters, like chapters or that's all about the story with the main character, and little short stories that are not linked throughout the book, and they are like me sort of fairy tales. What to say, I didn't finish the book. I read maybe 50% and I DNF'd it because it really didn't work for me. This is an atmospheric book, and the atmosphere is phenomenal, like one of the most incredible atmospheres I've ever read about. Like the atmosphere, 10 out of 10. The problem is I don't really care about atmosphere. Like if you have a great atmosphere, it's a good bonus, but to me I'm all about characters and plot. So if you don't have that, even if you have the best atmosphere in the entire world, I won't care. So this was the case here. Like the main character isn't developed enough. He's barely a shell of a character. Like he has no substance. He's just there, you know, to have someone to follow around to uncover this world. And so I didn't care one bit about him, and that's a great problem for me since I'm a character driven reader. If I don't have a character I love, I won't care about the book, and this was the case here. You also don't have a plot, which was really annoying for me. Characters are essential to me, but having a good plot is also really important to me. Like if I don't have at least a small plot, I won't be interested in the book, and this was the case here as well. Like you really don't have one. You're just supposed to be, you know, immersed in this incredible atmosphere and writing, and this didn't work for me at all. Like I think the world building is phenomenal, and I think this library is incredible, and the atmosphere is incredible. To be honest, I thought the writing was a bit pretentious, but I think that's just me. Most people seem to love it, so maybe you will. If you think you will love this kind of book, pick it up because it's a lot of people's favorites. But like I said, character driven reader can't read that kind of book. Then we have the 2 stars category. So first we have The Girl on the Train. So this is an adult thriller, a very famous adult thriller, and I was really disappointed because I didn't like it at all. I'm a character driven reader, I won't say that enough, and so caring about the characters is essential to me. I thought that for thrillers and horrors it wouldn't be a problem, because even though I don't care about the characters, that would be the plot and the atmosphere and it would be enough. I discovered about myself that no, it's not enough. Even in thrillers I have to like the characters. And that was my problem with this book. I hated all the main characters. Like, I couldn't stand any of them. So yeah, they could have all died and I couldn't have cared less. So because of that, I couldn't care less about this book because I wasn't interested at all in their story and in the mystery, and just didn't give a damn. I also found the plot extremely predictable. Like, I knew what was coming way before it happened. And it wasn't that interesting. Like the plot was very slow paced and repetitive, and I didn't care. Like really didn't care. Then we have Good Girl, Bad Girl. So I DNF'd it at 50%. Hated this book so much. Like it's an adult thriller, and I hated the main character. Like I don't even remember why, but I just remember reading it like, it's so annoying. I think it was really pretentious, like really pretentious, and a bit of a perv, and I don't know, like everything that happened I was like, ugh, cringing all the way through. And he was a really bad detective and a really bad inspector. Like I think he had no tact and no manners and no morality. I don't think, I can't remember well. I just know I hated him, and I hated the other main character, and they were extremely weird, and just I hated them, and the plot was so uninteresting, and yeah, so boring. So yeah, DNF'd it. Then we have Castle and Deer. So Castle and Deer is the second book in the Howl's Moving Castle series. Same, like I said before, it's a standalone, but it's just taking place in the same world, and Howl and Sophie do a brief appearance. Don't read it. Please do yourself a favor, stop at Howl's Moving Castle, because I really hated it. The story is taking place in this fantasy world inspired by Middle East, and you have this guy who sells carpet, and he falls in love with a princess, and one day she's kidnapped by a monster kind of genie, and he goes looking for her. Oh my gosh, I hated it. I hated our main character. He's very sexist, and you can see it, and he's just not a good character. Like, he's not complex, and the few things he does are really cringy. Like, I really hated him. You don't like the main character, the female main character as well, because she has no substance and no personality. She's just the princess in distress, so well. And there is a fatphobic content in this that I really hate it. And the plot is extremely slow and uninteresting, and the characters have no substance, and there are a lot of inconsistencies, and it was just awful. So yeah, don't recommend this at all. And finally, we have the worst 2 books I read during these 4 months, and these are Magpie Society Volume 1 and Volume 2. I hated the first one, and the second one was even worse. Basically, it's a YA thriller duology, and you're following these 2 girls who are attending this boarding school in England, and there's a murder in the school, and there's a podcast, and the 2 girls are trying to understand what happened and who killed this girl. Basically, that's the thing. Oh my gosh, the writing was awful. Like, seriously, so badly written. I'm sorry, but this was awful. Like, the writing was awful. The characters were awful. Like, so badly written. They had no personality. They were the worst cliches I ever read about. Their relationship was just laughable. Like, they were supposed to be friends, but there was so much drama, and it was just so uninteresting. And the plot went all over the place. It was so boring, so slow paced, so cringy, so overly dramatic. Just, it made no freaking sense. Like, when you have, the explanation at the end, like, it's just there for, the shock value, because it makes no sense. Really makes no sense. And so many inconsistencies, and so many things that don't work, and so many things like, this was awful. Just really awful. So yeah, that's it. We covered all of them. It was super long. I'm really sorry. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. And yeah, that's it for me, guys. Thank you so much. See you around.